Hi Ashley, this is your review for your exam 4 first attempt, and I just want to thank you and congratulate you for how neat your scratch paper is. It is so easy to help students when they are neat and orderly about the way they take their notes. On this is problem number 2 in your exam, and you actually did the manipulations right, so I'm just going to run to the part where you made a mistake. You found that x is greater than 7 or x is less than negative 12, and you plotted it correctly. And your mistake was that you wrote the interval like this, but that's the interval where there is no solution, which is right in here. So that is incorrect. The correct interval is negative. You read what you see on the number line, and let me go ahead and write the infinities. Negative infinity and infinity. So on the left you have negative infinity to negative 12, and that's union with, on the right, 7 to infinity. And so that's the only mistake you made. I think you realize what that was, but I want to refresh you on the OR. The OR includes solutions from both sets. So you had one set that went from negative infinity to negative 12, and the other set went from 7 to infinity. So you had a union, which includes everything in both sets. If this word had been and, then you would have had no solutions that were in this set and this set, so your answer would have been the empty set. On this problem, negative 3/7 x is greater than or equal to 15. You correctly did the x is less than or equal to negative 35. You correctly graphed it. And then you correctly wrote the interval on your paper, I think. I just don't know what notes you took after you did your exam, but I'm pretty sure you did write it correctly. And so I can give you credit for that, although I think it'll be good if you just retake the test anyway. But what you put on your answer on the exam was, I'll put this in orange, was this, and that's not an interval and doesn't have the negative infinity in it. On this problem, I didn't write the original problem because she did everything correct up to this point, and then on your scratch paper you correctly wrote negative 2 to infinity for your interval, which again, I can't tell if you did that before or after you looked at your answer, but on your exam you wrote let's see, just 2, or let's see, yeah, just positive 2. So I don't know what that was about. And again, on 4, you did the math correctly. You're doing very well with your math. You're just whipping it out correctly. But when you saw 0 equals negative 8 and you looked at your choices, you looked at B and saw that the solution set of 0, well, that's the one you marked. But what that's saying is that you're saying 0 is the solution to this. And I believe what you meant to say was that there is no solution, but that is written this way. So let me circle that in red. That is written as the null set like this. So it's not the same, it's a different answer from the solution set is 0. So be sure when you have a contradiction where you get something is equal to something else and it isn't true, that your answer is that, or that your answer is contradiction if they ask you that. And I see that they did ask you that, and you did get that part correct. So I suspect you just got confused between a solution of 0 and the null set. In this problem, You got this far. You started with x plus 3 is greater than or equal to negative 2 and x plus 7 is less than or equal to 7. And you found, you simplified that, you plotted it correctly so that x is greater than or equal to negative 5 looks like that, and x is less than or equal to 4 looks like this. The problem you had is you didn't obey the and. The and says that the solution set has to be in this and in this, so it's just the overlap that counts. If it had said or, then the solution set would have been everything in this case as well as everything in this case, which would have been negative infinity to infinity, which is what you put. But the correct answer would be negative 5 to 4, because that's where the two solution sets overlap, and so the solutions in that interval are included in both solution sets. So let's look at your answer for a minute. You said that the graph of the solution set was this, and you wrote down the interval, which you put brackets, but then now you know it's parentheses. But you wrote down that interval, so we already discussed that that was incorrect. But had that been correct, you then said that you then chose the option that the solution set is this, but it can't be the null set if it's this. So you need to be careful about that. They didn't offer you the option of negative infinity to infinity, but they did offer you the option to say the solution set is, and then you enter your own interval. Okay, you interpreted this problem incorrectly, so I want to talk about the meaning of this absolute value. Remember that absolute value is always a distance. So I'm going to go off on a little tangent and say if you have the absolute value of x equal to 4, then what that visually means is that you're talking about a distance that is 4 units from 0, and I meant to say less than or equal to, and in this case your solution set is less than that distance. So if your solution set is less than this distance, actually less than or equal to, then it is going to be contained in here because it is less than this distance. If you have the case where your absolute value is greater than that distance, then you have a distance from 0 and your absolute value is going to be everything that's larger than that distance. So if you think of it as a distance and you picture it on the number line that way, then you will know what your solution is supposed to look like. In this case, your interval would be a contained interval, negative 4 to 4, and in this case it would be a union, negative infinity to negative 4, union with 4 to infinity. So let's look at the specific problem at hand and put that off to the side. You actually simplified this correctly, so I'll jump to that step. Okay, you got this far correctly where you graphed each individual one. But now it's saying that the distance has to be less than 11/3, less than or equal to 11/3, and greater than or equal to 1. So this is an and situation where your solution set is going to be the overlap. I'll write it here, the overlap right there. So your solution set is going to be the interval 1 to 11/3. And as we looked at up here, when you have a less than or equal to, you expect to have a contained interval like this and like this. So your answer was negative infinity to infinity. I'll write that down. And you answered that the solution set graphed as this. Here's another problem where you have a less than or equal to, so when you isolate your absolute value by subtracting 11 from both sides, you're going to have a distance is less than or equal to 12. So whatever m plus 5 is, that distance is going to be less than or equal to 12. That means your interval is going to be contained somehow, and so you're going to write it like this with numbers there. So you simply have to solve for those numbers. So you correctly got to m is less than or equal to 7. You also got to m is greater than or equal to negative 17. In this case, because it's a contained interval, the correlation is going to be an and. And so as you graph this, you will graph m is less than or equal to 7, m is greater than or equal to negative 17, and you are going to include those solutions that overlap. So m is less than or equal to 7, looks like this. M is greater than or equal to negative 17, looks like this. And the overlap looks like this. So the correct solution is the interval that is from negative 17 to 7. You treated this as an OR situation. I think if you think of this as distances and visualize it first, that won't happen. But your answer was that your graph was negative infinity to infinity, and so was your interval. I'm going to break this up so that it processes correctly, so you'll need to go on to part 2 of this review.